7 Dragons Continent. Inside Zong Palace, someone shouted, calling out to Jan Qin Chen, claiming he had kept him enslaved for 100 years. A girl. Survive. He needed to find any way to get out of here. King Cheng kissed Anne. He looked at her, admiring her figure and her impressive appearance, and said, "Back down." Her father said that she had always been stubborn, and that he couldn't bear the thought of her marrying Sinan because he was a scoundrel. The lady replied. Abruptly, he realized that he wouldn't be able to stop them. Her father said that the royal family was very greedy, and that if she didn't marry the prince, they would. They would annex the northern and southern lands of the kingdom. The girl didn't know what to do. It seemed she wanted to maintain her family's honor. Hyun was disgusted. He thought he had found a beautiful wife, but this was definitely not what he expected from her. The girl's father took a deep breath, and he thought about the fact that this son-in-law might be able to temporarily save his city. Even if the king hated them for it, they still had no reason to send military troops to them. Janan, quite angry, decided to enter his house. He said that he could finally see his beloved father-in-law. Han said it could be. Sure that the soldiers would do their job, and that his daughter would be safe with him, because he could protect her from anyone. Anne added that, if anyone dared to hurt her, he would kill them. His father looked at him and told him that if anyone ever hurt her, he shouldn't blame his father for being rude. The father left, and his men bowed, and everyone said in unison that she was the leader of the town. The chief loudly announced that there would be an engagement at the main palace of the Crowed city tomorrow, and that everyone had to stand guard and protect his daughter. Again, everyone agreed in one voice. While enjoying the hot springs, Janan, he was wondering if she removed these shackles, he would willingly dedicate his soul to her so she could reach the next level. Began to concentrate his spiritual energy to obtain the 3 soul secrets, and meditated. The ancient soul of chaos, Onan, allowed him learn even faster. The 7 secret techniques, the 3 secrets of the soul, would help him improve his body and accelerate his training. Something flashed, and there was a kind of explosion. Anne stood up from the water, clenched her hand into a fist, and complained that the energy-gathering process here was too slow. However, the talk at half. Fact that a small mansion had a hot spring with such abundant aura was already quite rare. A girl approached the boy and, covering herself with a towel, to avoid looking at his naked body, asked him to get dressed. She wasn't surprised that he took so long to wash because the water here is very nice. She asked him what the problem was, and if he didn't see that she was preparing for the wedding. It was the maid. Her name is Kang The girl told him that it was better if the boy didn't lie, because he had come to use the special perfume pool, which they had been preparing all night for Miss Jan Ruxue. He asked her to hurry up. Hurry, because the wedding was going to start very soon. Anja was getting dressed and said she needed some time to prepare. Kang looked at her and said that, even though the wedding ceremony would start soon, there were already many honorable people gathering to congratulate her, so there was no need to delay. Janan was afraid it was more than just congratulations, so he was curious to see how things would go with this good show, and thought about the fact, suitable for cultivation. She approached his face and aggressively told him to shut up, and Cheng grabbed him by the collar, asking him how dare he say such a thing to her, that he needed to become stronger before Jan Qin Cheng found him. The 7 Dragons Continent is a lower-level continent than the Blue Dragon Continent. Therefore, the concentration of aura here is much lower. In this world, martial arts are divided into 7 levels: gathering, controlling the circulation of vessels, guru, junior, grandmaster, bullet master, sage, and absolute peak. Each of these levels is further divided into 9 ranks, and surpassing them all allows one to reach the pinnacle of martial arts. Upon breaking through this absolute peak and achieving immortality, Anne recalled Jan King Cheng. After all, she was already halfway to reaching that peak. The guy smiled, scratched the back of his head, and said that there was a vast difference between them. Anne reflected on the fact that the original owner of the body, or rather, the fool who brought dishonor to his family, was now a thing of the past, because the new Jian Nan would be taking charge of the palace. The next day, the ceremony attendees were socializing, talking, and eating. Someone inquired as to why everyone had been summoned to the ceremony so suddenly. Nobody knew anything about it. A man approached Brother Lin and mentioned that he had somehow arrived early, adding that his daughter, Linu Yu, was simply gorgeous. The girl was standing next to Lin Chunan and continued talking with him. He thanked him for his compliments and stated that, to be the fiancé of Linu Yu, one must be worthy of her, and all the scoundrels would get what they deserved if they dared to approach her. Standing next to him was such a thing, and added that she would destroy him, The boy didn't appreciate being grabbed like that and asked if she didn't want to take his soul, especially since he, Saint Wosu. The table prepared for the Hyun family remained empty. It seemed they were afraid to appear today. After all, Janan's scum were infamous. In the entire city, I doubt anyone would dare to pursue something like that. Everyone was contemplating who her fiancé could be. After all, it was a confirmed fact that he would be the heir to the princely house, but nobody knew for sure. The city's families feared trying to avoid this marriage, as it would be imprudent on their part. Wosu asked Chunyuan if San would be her fiancé. He responded that it was very possible because he and John Ray Yuxu had been friends for a long time, and John was going to stay in the Yangon family city to become the leader and protector of the city. But San is far too cruel and merciless. Furthermore, with the support of the Song family, he could become a rather formidable rival for them. He is such a ruthless person that perhaps the Yangon family, literally, he was like a real beast. Someone approached and yelled at everyone to get out because they had taken his spot. He dispersed the crowd, and everyone turned to look. They were wondering what was happening. It was an angry guy who apparently really wanted to see Janrei Yuqui. He was very angry because he wanted to see someone who was more suitable to be a son-in-law than he was. Zhaoan and the others were very surprised because if San was here, they couldn't understand who the groom was. Anand stopped and turned around. His father approached and asked San if he was going to kill someone at his residence. San bowed and said no, adding that had resisted for exactly 100 years, and now that he was doing it willingly, she didn't like it. The girl removed her hand from his neck and considered he just wanted to visit his uncles, although he didn't understand why Ray Yuqi had decided to get married so suddenly. At first, they looked at him in silence. Then they decided. Tell him that she had already met her lover. So it had been his decision, and his parents added that he and Ruxue were probably not destined to be together. San was surprised by this. The boy became very angry and asked his aunt how she could not know that he was going to defend their city. He said vehemently that in the entire city there would be no man more worthy of her heart than him. The father waved his hand, while a furious San told him that he didn't believe it and demanded that he show him in person who her beloved was. The father's soldiers, Ray Yuqi, were already approaching An. He shouted that if they stood in his way, he would enter by force. Yan Ruxue then entered the room. The girl appeared simply irresistible. Everyone was delighted and asked San to leave. After all, she truly has someone she loves, and he should stop dreaming about their wedding. Since it's not going to happen, he refused to accept it. Zhu continued to argue that she had been with him since she was a child, so how could she love someone else? Another person, and not him. He still believed it was a joke, and that she was actually going to run away with him. The girl replied that she was not joking or lying, and she added that today was a day of great joy. She said that if he stayed to celebrate with them, she would be incredibly happy, but if she takes his soul by force, the chances of him obeying her are very small. But if he gives it to her willingly, then was against their marriage and didn't give them his blessing, then she would have to ask him to leave. He shouted that she was his woman and that for all that meant I would obtain it. Today, Ray Yuxu also began to grow angry. He stated that this was incredibly brazen and issued a military order for him to return to the barracks immediately. San raised his hand and declared that anyone who dared to steal his wife was a dead man. Sa was willing to remain here for his family and for the sake of JY. Now she's simply marrying someone else. He questioned whether he believed he would obey his orders after this. The power of the Sao family was far too significant. He angrily declared that today he would confront the one who stole his wife and would have to immediately go out and fight him. Everyone watched and seemed to begin thinking that the family was deceiving them, and if there truly was a fiancé, he would have already appeared in public. Just then, the groom arrived, approached, and asked who was shouting. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. He yawned and complained that they were making so much noise that they had interrupted his sleep. He became a little tense and said that it could have a negative effect on his wedding night. There stood Ray, Yuxu, and Han, surrounded by soldiers. San looked at Han with great disdain and questioned how this piece was even capable of attracting attention. His father questioned how they had let him out and ordered him to return. Everyone was surprised that was really her fiancé. Ray Yuxu asked the guy to go back and not cause them so much trouble. He retorted that he only wanted to see the loud-mouthed dog. He won't have any problems, and he'll be able to uncover 3 more family secrets and gain 3 more lives. She needs his ancient soul. She looked at him, and, big mouth, Anne waved her hand dismissively, and said that it didn't matter who he was now, because in an hour he would be the boss of this city, and when she met him, he should remember to bow to him. Han stepped forward and remarked that it seemed Janan was more worthy than himself. Janan responded that it would be best if he left, already from his family. San turned and said that he would personally throw him out. Han looked at him and realized that he possessed the 9th level of Qi gathering. His father began to worry that Janan had come out alone with the intention to humiliate and embarrass the family. His mother pleaded with him to say something. San clenched his hand into a fist and was already swinging, but then Ruxue managed to stop him with her sword. The girl stood in front of Han and declared that, from this day forward, he was her husband and that they would be together until death, and if San wanted to lay a hand on him, he would have to get through her first. The guy, completely surprised, said that since she was willing, if he hesitates to draw his sword for him, he should just kill him today. Han decided to step forward, and Ruxo tried to stop him, but he failed because the guy, he believes he is a man and only needs to have faith in him. Janan believes that since they are a couple, he will protect her for the rest of her life and won't let anyone hurt her in any way. Anne told him that if he loves her so much, he should make a gambling bet with him. Anne didn't understand what he was talking about. Anne offered 3 betting options. The first option was to bet for money, the second was for his dignity, and the third was simply for their lives. San, once, he accepted. She told him that she would remove his shackles, but warned that if he dared to touch her with his filthy hands or attempt to escape, she would kill him. Again, did not understand what he meant by dignity, and smiled and said that if he lost, he would lose his little friend, and he would take it back to the palace. The guy asked him if he was afraid, so he told him to just choose what they were going to bet on. They stood facing each other, and he said, okay, he accepted, but only. He wanted to consult him further about archery, fighting formations, and strength, and he replied that it was fine, and since he had made the bet, he could choose in what he would compete with him. People whispered that the guy had absolutely no shame. Inu said that Janan had been in the military camp for more than 10 years, so he had mastered weapons. Linu Yu was glad that he would soon get rid of this trash, otherwise he would have been eating dirt. San grabbed a kind of sack, left the sack on the ground, and said that it was time for them to start, and that he was betting 10,000 gold on the first matches. And asked him if I had something to bet, and, smiling, he said it had cost him a great deal to marry a girl like her, so he didn't have any money on him. Ryu's father, he got angry and retorted that he hadn't spent a single cent. Janan then took out 7 third-grade gold pills, stating that each one was worth 10,000 gold, and that was everything he was going to bet, asking if his wager was too small compared to what his father had bet. He was surprised, but he wasn't very pleased with such a bet. After all, not even the city chief possessed that many pills. He yelled at him, calling him a spendthrift who was ruining the family, and forbade him from, literally. In a matter of seconds, the shackles broke apart. The boy looked at her and touched his neck, thinking about how cruel that woman was. He glared at her with rage, and, betting with him, San thought that with these golden immortality pills, one could reach the pinnacle of cultivation, but 70,000 gold was still a substantial amount. Impressive, that kind of money could cover the entire city's annual expenses. Everyone stared at him, wondering, but no one could figure out if he actually possessed that much or if he was simply bluffing, and smiled and announced that anyone was welcome to participate and bid. It appeared that someone in the crowd was eager to acquire those pearls. The man questioned why he was wasting his time. After all, he was despicable. Ruxue's father yelled that he needed it, and her mother retorted that he was insane. He reflected on the fact that this son-in-law wasn't as valuable as this immortality pill. All the families were betting very aggressively, 20,000 gold, each on Zhaoan's victory. Lin Uyu whispered something to Lin Chunyuan. Janan commented that they were aware of how skilled he was in battles, and continued to hold the pearl in his hands, and asked who else was willing to add 10. San was short on funds. Who would be the first to contribute? Xenu raised his hand and announced that his family would bet another 10,000. Wosu turned him around, grabbed him by the collar of his sweater, and angrily demanded to know what he was doing. After all, his family's reserves were only 30 of gold. The boy told his father not to worry because, knowing San and knowing how much of a loser Yanan is, he was confident that if they bet a little more, everything would be fine. Yan asked what they were whispering about, reminding them that people were waiting. Ojo raised his hand with a hint of reluctance and said that his family, he figured there was only one way out. The boy swung his arm and then his leg, hitting the girl with considerable force, but she endured the blow and shrunk down, was betting 30,000 gold pieces. Anne smiled and complimented his generosity. Furthermore, the guy thought that the big fish had finally taken the bait. Anne then headed to his father-in-law. He said that, in that case, he was asking him to be a witness. He accepted, but asked him to leave immediately because he didn't want to see him. Now, even though he accepted, he was left deep in thought. He had given away 7 golden pills of immortality for literally nothing. The arena of judgment. Janan and San stood facing each other, with only behind them. There was a multitude of people who had come to the wedding, and behind Janan was a multitude of soldiers. Janan smiled and greeted him, while San looked at him with a threatening aura. He turned around and smiled, announcing that whoever captured Janan first would obtain a great reward. In front of the men who were facing each other, their troops were positioned opposite one another, and the rules of the battle were announced. The rules were very simple. Both sides. They needed to align themselves and start fighting in order to win. Everyone began shouting, "Go for it," repeatedly, and noticed that something was wrong with his troops. They really didn't seem like normal troops. Someone shouted that Master San had never lost before. Ray Yuxu was sitting next to her father, and she also realized that something was amiss. She asked her father what was wrong with Anne's troops, and her father told her that he had hired them on purpose, because he didn't want to be embarrassed in the eyes of others because of that crawling scum. Rokushui became worried. Lin Chunan turned to Wosu, and a redhead with a beautiful figure was sitting on someone and moaning. Janan's neck was chained to something. The woman sitting on him was to such a small size that the boy couldn't reach her. She glanced at him slyly and said that if he really wanted to cultivate in secret from her, he should squat down. Asked him if he wanted 3 golden pills of immortality to make his family the strongest in all of Snow City. He responded that his family had actually also bet 20,000 gold, and a marriage between members of his family and the J family would resolve all their conflicts. Ray Yuxu's father sat in the stands and yelled at the boy, telling him he had better hand over the pills to his enemy willingly and not make any unnecessary attempts because he wouldn't succeed regardless. Anne smiled, thinking that her father-in-law's expression was just as enthusiastic, and told them not to worry, but to wait, and the situation would soon resolve itself. Father raised his hand and announced the start of the contest. All the troops lined up. Yan shouted that he was going to be killed. Everyone was surprised to see them lined up in a long, snake-shaped formation. This is an extremely difficult position to attack, because it allows him to kill the enemy in a matter of minutes, without leaving a single piece of their armor intact. Inu was next to his father, and told him there was no need to worry, because Zhaoan would definitely win. And if he didn't, he wouldn't name his son Janan. Gohu asked if he would name his grandson after him. Inu blinked and said, yes, but it still seemed impossible. Anu simply offered to wait and see if the piece of would start to cry. But it seemed Janan wasn't going to cry. As soon as Han's troops approached, he told his own soldiers to raise their shields. They all positioned themselves with their shields surrounding Janan, Sang Zhenyu. Facing the trembling King Chen, who was covered by a small blanket near the balcony exit, he laughed and declared that he had been Jan Qin Chen's slave. Laughed and said he had told them Janan was a dead man. It's not as if he could withstand the turtle formation defense against a snake, the Zhaoan troops. They continued to hammer at Han's defense, but even so, this defense was better than nothing. The father remained very calm and told Ru Xiu to forget about it, and she replied that she wouldn't look at it, but the girl responded that she was completely wrong. San said he wanted to see how long the guy could last in that position and told his troops to break through his defense. They kept pounding his defense, but they still couldn't penetrate it. Han couldn't understand how this was possible. Ru Shui commented that it's actually one of the 10 long-lost battle techniques called the Great Tortoise. It seemed that this guy wasn't so simple after all. Han, however, had an ace up his sleeve. Han positioned himself between the defenses and smiled, and it seemed that Anu wasn't so calm anymore. He told his father not to worry so much, because after all, it was impossible for someone like him to know one of the 10 techniques and break through their defenses like that. He shouted that one more blow would break through the troops' defenses entirely. They ran towards them again, launching another attack. An opening appeared, and Cao rejoiced, but they abruptly changed formation, and once again, the defense was not penetrated. It seems that Han is also trying to form a long serpent formation. John Rushue identified it as an imperial dragon pillar formation. They all surrounded San, along with his troops. It was also one of the forgotten methods of the 10 strikes, and is known for its offensive mobility. The spear was right in San's face. Yan. For 100 years, and that during all that time, he had genuinely wanted to escape, and that they were making a good start. However, anyone who had been bullied asked how insignificant San was. With this movement, San thought of something that keeps him alive, and it seems that he actually hadn't read the entire collection of books in the temple. Jan King Chen, while in confinement for a certain reason, won the first game, leaving all the families utterly speechless. Everyone, they regretted betting so much, as they could have used those funds to secure medicine for an entire year. Jan King Chen picked up a bag containing 30,000 gold, and remarked that it seemed luck was on his side that day. Anu immediately accused him of cheating, insisting that a scumbag like him couldn't possibly win. The father of Inu slapped him, and pointed out that if it weren't for him, they could have lost 10,000 less. Wosu stared intently at Ray Yuxu's father, and stated that, regardless, they would pay his family 30,000 gold, adding that his family had a truly excellent son-in-law. Ray Yuxu's father then questioned why Wosu was looking at him that way. San started trampling his troops, pointing out how useless they were. San requested the next match, driven by his desire for the guy to die. Junin held his prize in his hands and said that although they had precipitated the wedding a bit, they had earned a lot of money, and, furthermore, had rediscovered a battle tactic that had been forgotten for a long time. She considered it a great gift for her baby. Ruxue's father took the prize and said it was very good, and that he agreed with her assessment regarding the battle strategy. Ruxue looked at him, wondering if he had managed to find a new copy of the ancient books. The girl smiled at him, and they, for so long, would want to leave her sooner or later. She added that she had been gathering strength to do so for 100 years, and she began to move towards Peath, realized that this boy was not as easy an opponent as he seemed. She thought that he knew in advance that he would have to fight San, and that was why he decided to prepare. Before, Linu looked at him and realized he had truly underestimated him, as he had gone too far. San approached Yan and said, angry, he reminded them that they still had 2 fights left. He told him to take his time. He looked at his future mother-in-law and said he wanted to ask her something. He asked that, since San is her nephew, what she thought about continuing the fight, because if they continued, he was afraid he wouldn't be able to leave the house today. Everyone is surprised by his confidence, because he seems to believe he can beat San once again. Ray's mother, Yuxu, tells him that they should decide for themselves, and continue the fight, and that they don't have to worry about her. Yan replies that he understands. He touched his chin, and thought that he was afraid that if he kept having to, dealing with Zhaoan might anger her mother-in-law, and she also felt that the relationship between the Cao family and the Yang family wasn't as good and simple as it appeared. San grabbed the sword and declared that enough was enough with the talking, and it was time to start competing. He said he would paint it so his mother wouldn't recognize it. He was carrying a bow of 10 stones in his hand. Someone in the crowd commented that they usually used a level 9 bow. This was the highest level, and, to obtain a more powerful bow, it needed to be custom-made, and this particular bow weighed 300 pounds. Apparently, San possessed incredibly strong arms. Sangan shielded the boy, and that's when he realized he should have gotten out of there while she was still standing. The girl thought he wanted to kill her in order to his hand, and said that he would definitely lose this time, because with his strength, he had no chance of winning. And furthermore, the archery skills of San had always been famous throughout Snow City and was incomparable to Jinan. Ruxue didn't understand why he had agreed to do this. San said that he would soon burn with shame. Jinan sat on the bench and didn't listen to him. San asked him to bring the stone slab. His troops were already carrying it and launched it upwards. Anne took out the arrow and shot it upwards. The stone slab broke into pieces, hitting right in the center. He then turned to Anne and asked what was happening with him. San was indeed capable of hitting a moving target. Everyone was surprised at how he was able to shatter a stone slab with a single arrow. After all, it was an extremely rare feat. Jinan laughed and said that he could call him an archery master because he was capable of shooting in such a way. So she became pregnant with his child, leaving Ray Yuxu's father in a state of inexpressible shock. Ray Yuxu chuckled a bit. San tossed him a bow, telling the guy to stop talking nonsense, or he would finish him off right then and there. Han picked up the sword. Someone in the crowd laughed and told him not to hurt himself while pulling the string. Anne examined the bow and began to comment. The base was crafted from bloody rhinoceros horn, and the string was made of his tendon. This bow is truly exceptional. San inquired what he was looking at, and suggested he try shooting it. He laughed, saying perhaps he was afraid that, be able to cultivate, she declared that she wouldn't allow it. Anne thought about how delusional he was and how terrified he seemed. King Cheng grabbed his shoulder, pulling him back to it would fall and break. Sengon chimed in, saying he should be more afraid of his teeth falling out. Janan explained he didn't use it because he was afraid of breaking it, and he didn't want me to ask him for money to fix it. San retorted that it was all nonsense, and when asked if he could break his 10-stone bow, he said yes, he could do it, he would pay them, and they would kneel before him. Inu said that in that case, they would also kneel and call him grandfather. Ant knocked the arrow. He heard a kind of cracking sound, and the bow stupidly broke in half. The guy said that they should now kneel together before him. Han told Ruxue that they weren't even married yet and already had 2 grandchildren, and the girl replied that she didn't want any grandchildren. Anne and Jan started saying that the man was cheating and that he must have been up to some trickery, and with his real powers, he could never have done that. He replied that he knew they couldn't admit his. So now the grandfather will enlighten his grandchildren. He asked them to bring him a 15-stone bow. Everyone was very surprised and thought that. I thought he was crazy because a 15-stone bow weighs 450 feet. Ryu's father said that this bow was made of a solid stone, and its string was made from the tendon of the Snake King. This bow is a treasure from the city lord's palace, and no one has been able to draw it for many years. Lin Chunan asked Uyu if Janan could shoot a bow like that, and the girl said she didn't know because she had never heard of his archery skills. But even if he could, usual size, she glared menacingly at the guy and told him that if he thought he could escape, he was wrong. The guy screamed, looked at her, and thought it was the end for him. Shoot it. It was unlikely he would hit the target. Janan only picked up 3 arrows, and everyone was very surprised, because the more arrows, better. The guy started aiming, shifting from one side to the other, and then fired. He hit all 3 arrows, and the people couldn't believe it. Ryu's father was very surprised because, even though the targets were scattered in different directions, he still managed to hit them all. The way he handled the arrows was truly an exquisite display of archery skill. This was their second competition, and Janan had won again. Nobody understood why San had lost again. San said it was simply impossible. He approached the target Janan was shooting at. All the people began to be disappointed with him. Anne thought that he couldn't lose so easily because his cousin only belonged to him. He believed she should be his alone. Jian Hanan took out the arrow, and he told his grandchildren that it was time for them to finally give him the match prize, and shot the drawn arrow at Zhaowen, hitting him squarely in the groin, and retrieved the arrow. He demanded to know how Janan dared to do that. He started running towards him, yelling that since he was seeking death, he would help him find it, and he would make him pay tenfold and torture him to death. Anne looked at him and said that this was Janan. He was at the 2nd level, while Han was at the 10th level. The 2nd level was fighting against the 10th level. Nobody understood how someone at the 2nd level could oppose someone at the 10th. This time, Janan would definitely be killed. Ruxue begged him opportunity to escape and that he had to do it by any means necessary. He punched her and screamed that he was about to die. The boy jumped. There was some kind of to withdraw. San declared that he would kill him today and make her his wife. Han punched San in the face, hitting him so hard that he crashed to the ground. Han retorted that Han didn't have. The 2nd level actually possessed the 6th level of refinement and had been deceiving him all this time. Anne was furious and declared that Anne would die today. Janan then delivered a punch to the stomach. San was literally sent flying. Han followed up with a punch to the face, causing San to bleed. Han attempted a kick, but missed, and instead delivered a kick from above. It seemed like the end for Anne. Everyone was shocked that he was taken down so quickly. San was already lying on the ground, covered in blood. Han was also on the ground, coughing, repeatedly saying that such a thing was impossible. Ino shouted that even if Janan was at level 6, he wouldn't be able to defeat someone at level 9. Gohu slapped him again, saying that there was no way he could calm down and demanded to know how he dared to deceive him. He grabbed his battered son by the clothes and said that he was probably still plotting something, and asked what he was up to, but didn't understand, and approached. Anne stepped on his face with his foot. The guy took off his cloak and asked if he understood now, revealing his back covered in tattoos. Inu stared at him, mouth agape, said about the cut vessels. This method could instantly increase the power in the body dozens of times, but along with damaging the vessels, the stain, internal meridians would also be destroyed as a result. After that, further cultivation would be many times more difficult for him and could even lead to his death. Portal. The girl sat on the ground and said that he had cut off a piece of her soul in order to escape her and go to another world. He yelled at her from the portal that sooner. Enu laughed and told her father that, as he could see, Anne was truly a loser because he had broken his meridians, meaning he couldn't advance any further. From the 6th level, his father realized that this guy wasn't as easy to deal with as he initially thought, because he had assumed he was just a normal teenager and nothing to worry about. Ray Yuxu looked at him, wondering why he resorted to such an extreme method. Han had said he was finished, and An had asked him to stop, but Jinan. He felt he was sending him straight to heaven as he kicked him in the face. Death came instantly. Han's foot rested on the dead man's chest. San. People watched in shock that he actually dared to kill San. Jinan, remembering his wedding, approached Ray Yuxu, smiled, and asked if they could continue. She confidently said yes. Linu Yu reflected on how An had hidden so many things from him, but luckily, he had cut the vials, so he didn't let him know. He had a long life ahead of him, but he still felt unworthy of her, and that Han Ray Yuxu was no match for her. Anju and Ray Yuxu bowed to each other. They bowed to each other, and were now able to go to the newly chosen room. The entire room was filled with wedding candles, creating the perfect setting for their first wedding night. Han ran his hands over the girl's cloak, and said that she had surprised him greatly that day. He said that it turned out he wasn't a complete loser, but a very intelligent and brave man. She asked him why he had been hiding all of this from her. Embarrassed, he said that he wasn't hiding anything, and the boy was already, or later, he would recover that part of her soul, and in the near future, she would worship him for millennia as her lord. His mouth was covered in blood, was very eager to get to the point. The girl stood very close to him and asked him why he had killed Zhaoan, since his family would not let it go. Alone, and he had even cut his blood vessels. He grabbed her and kissed her. They embraced, and he said that there were many people at the wedding today, and if he hadn't broken the meridians, he wouldn't have been able to deal with the families. He said that they could have taken strict measures to defend themselves, but he hid his strength in order to protect the Yang family, and that, in the near future, he was going to take over the palace. He said that the Yang family was in the minority, and that was why he broke his meridians. To them, he was just a loser, but now they saw his other abilities. Yan Ryushu didn't believe that he would do something like this for his family, but this sacrifice was too great. She took his hand and thanked him. He told her that, after all, he was her husband now. Jinan was already waiting. She took his hand and she began to speak of when they became a couple, saying that he would be her husband forever and she would protect him every day while he was at the residence. The boy then spoke his name, and he thought it better not to mention that he was doing it to become stronger. He looked at her hand, abruptly released it, and turned around. Rukshui told him that he had to stay with them for a year, but if he wanted, he could stay with them longer, and if he decided to leave, she would tell her father to give him a large sum of money, and then he would be free. Anne moved closer to her and told her that she shouldn't think about that now, and that they would talk about it another time. She removed the one responsible for his soul breaking apart and going to another world. She was grabbing the chain around the guy's neck and, while sitting on top of him, saying that she screamed that even if he escaped to the ends of the earth, she would find him and kill him anyway. Tiano Continent. Anne was still lying down, cloak, and threw it on the bed. She felt very embarrassed. He began to remove her cloak and told her that they had obtained tens of thousands of gold in order to country. This was their wedding day, and now their first wedding night, so it was best to postpone all important conversations until tomorrow. Jinan offered him a kiss, but she immediately dodged it, and he ended up kissing the bed. He couldn't understand why everything was going wrong in this room. The girl sat down beside him and began to apologize, saying that she wanted to be an honorable husband and wife with him from the very beginning. She asked him to allow her to accept him as her husband, but without all of that, because she really couldn't do it right now. The boy became a little angry at such nonsense and pointed out that she wanted to leave him alone on their wedding night. That was so cruel. He asked her if she even had a heart. She replied that she didn't, but her maid Kanger would stay with him tonight. The boy smiled and accepted. He thought too, the fact that she only had a year to live. Anyway, Zanger approached, looked at them, and asked how he could help. Rukshui got out of bed, and she asked the maid if she wanted to stay with her son-in-law that day. The girl was almost out, and Zanger said, very surprised, that she wondered if she really was a prostitute, and she just smiled. Jinan told her to take the girl's clothes off. Rukshui was leaving, saying that one wasn't better than the other. Zanger wasn't keen on. She took off her clothes, cried, and begged him not to misunderstand, but she didn't know what to say. Han, with a satisfied look, told her she didn't need to tell him. Resting on the grass, he became suspicious for some reason. He looked at his hands, overjoyed to have escaped, and wondered if he was in a new body. Nothing. The girl begged him not to do anything to her, but he didn't listen and continued taking off her clothes. Sierre thought about the fact that it was her body. Thinking that he seemed like he wanted to force himself on her, he began to put his hand on her back, asking her not to make so much noise and reassuring her that he wasn't going to touch her. Janan's touch was very pleasant for the girl. He stopped and announced that he was ready. The girl wondered why he was finished so quickly. He sat next to her and said, "No. You can't just say things like that." Janan explained that he had only been checking her physical condition, as described in the book he was now handing her, along with the immortality pill. He said this pill would help her accelerate her cultivation by 10 times. The boy also said that, if she didn't eat the pill, he would eat it himself. He insisted that she eat it now. Hyana didn't expect to encounter such a pure yin body, and one that was worthy of proper development. She felt that losing her virginity now would be too much of a waste. Janan walked in, stretching and complaining about how tired he was, having been practicing all night. Zanger said that he had put in his best effort. Ruxue, looking displeased, asked Zanger to serve her tea. She turned her back to him and walked away. Hyun Ergon asked her to wait, thinking about how awful it was when girls became jealous. Outside, it was a warm and sunny day. They were on a beautiful bridge near an old lake. Ruxue's father and mother sat facing her and Janan told him. He stood up, laughed, and declared that he had finally escaped the clutches of that evil Diabla, and that one day he would return to this palace and destroy it. They said that, now that he was part of their family, they would protect him. His father said that if he did anything shameful and disgraced the family's honor, he would not. Forgiving everything, Jian An smiled and agreed to all of it. His mother questioned why he was being so cruel. Rushue's mother then turned to An and told him that even though he could no longer cultivate, she could see that he truly loved her daughter. She added that they should work hard to give her a grandson as soon as possible. Ray Yuxu looked at him silently, and she seemed quite unhappy, and chuckled, thinking things would be a bit more complicated with his bride. Ruxue told her father that she had just received the news. Her father feared that the entire district would gather there today. This time, the youngest prince of the court, Jufu, and his butler would be arriving. This prince is 16 years old, and at the 7th step of the gathering stage, accompanied by an aristocratic man serving as his butler, named Inen, a great master with immense strength. Ruxue asked her father what they would do. Her father told her that His Highness was aware that she would not find happiness in marrying San. Perhaps he believed that he would appear too arrogant, and that openly attacking the Yang family would not be easy. Rushu. She replied that, this time, however, they would have His Imperial Majesty's brother among their ranks, and if he were to ask them to do something, he promised that they would do anything, within reason. Janan inquired what they would do if he crossed the line. Rayo, looking displeased, said that, in that case, behind him, a surprised girl asked if he was dead, thinking about how she had given him a lethal dose of poison. They would have to endure it all. The girl's parents asked if Anne had any other options. He responded that he had no other option, and that he had no idea about anything, and if he asked them for something within reason, they would do it and try to accommodate his requests as much as possible. However, if their consultations went beyond what was normal, then they would kill him, and they would not forgive anyone. His father slammed the table and said that all of that was nonsense, and if they killed him, then he didn't know what they would do. If his troops began to threaten their borders, then his residents would be in a desperate situation. His father asked him not to interrupt. If he didn't understand, Janan looked at him and told him that he shouldn't worry. They wouldn't be able to seize Nevada City for now through marriage, and added that they would only pressure him under the emperor's orders. Han asked his father-in-law if they were asking him to cede his authority over the city. He would accept their authority. Her father immediately refused and asked what would happen if the Rays were threatened. Yuku, the girl, responded that at that time, in that case, he would prefer to commit suicide rather than let them succeed. Father and Anne immediately began to object to that. Janan gently took Ray Yuku's hand, and she felt a little embarrassed and thought that maybe he really did care that much about her. Ray's mother asked Janan that since he had offered to kill them, what his plan was. Then the guy said he had a 3-ring strategy to implement. Anner's father-in-law immediately interrupted him, saying that it was easy for him to say that now. Furthermore, even a small amount of poison should be enough to kill a person. How could Janan even survive after something like that? It turned out, but this time the assistants have a great master among them. He questioned how they were supposed to kill him. The girl's mother told him to finish listening to the guy, Anner. He began to take something out of his coat, pulling out a book, and said that today, his father-in-law didn't need to worry about such things and should instead focus on practicing. He mentioned that, with this legendary fighting technique and the immortality pills, it would have an astonishing effect. Anner's father-in-law took what he offered and paused, a little surprised because he didn't understand what it was. The man said it was for the remaining rings and added that he would organize everything. Anir, Ray, and Yuxu positioned themselves in front of the troops, who wore stern expressions. Janan said that it was enough, as the aura of war was already emanating from them so intensely. Ruxue told Ain that there were 3,000 Nevada City guards, and that he could choose whomever he wanted, but that he would really only be taking 30 people. He thought it would be too little to use against a master, but the boy confidently replied that 30 men would be sufficient for him. Anne addressed the troops, but silence remained. Anne stated that she would have to teach them the war motto, and that she would later assist them in strengthening their military spirit. Ruxu told Janan that he needed to choose someone first. He offered to discuss his cultivation skills and combat strength. Anne refused, saying that he wasn't looking at their cultivation level. The guy then began to loudly tell them that they should know that he and they were going on a special mission that would be that the previous owner of this body was also named Janan and had been in love with Linu since childhood, but he was unremarkable, which is why she didn't. Extremely dangerous. He added that it was a matter of life and death, and that those who wished to leave could do so right now. All the troops raised their hands and shouted in unison that they would never retreat. Anne said that was very good and began to tell them that they had to meet certain conditions, that if he deemed they had been fulfilled, he would take them with him, and Ruxue wondered what those conditions might be. The close combat fighter had hair, knotted pink, and a rather menacing appearance. The scout carried a type of spear and wore a helmet, and the first-class archer carried a normal bow, and also a helmet, and thought to himself that he should be satisfied with them. He raised his hand, addressed the formation, and said that they needed to find a rhythm and that, if everyone understood, they should step forward. Everyone remained still, because no one understood what he meant. Ray asked what it was about the rhythm, and if Yan said it was so necessary, Ruxue wondered how there could be so many people in the city guard, and yet no one was aware of it. The troops couldn't understand why on earth they needed to find a rhythm to kill the Grandmaster. They didn't understand what kind of games he was playing. They were saying that the rhythm was for women, and that they were just idiots being sent to the front lines. A guy emerged from the crowd and asked if they needed someone to play the war drums. Han said it was all right and asked him to stand up, then asked him his name. He stood up and said his name was Leng Le. He paid attention to her. The guy was standing behind her with a flower in his hands, and she apparently wasn't too happy about it. However, a month ago, audibly, he expressed his gratitude for being noticed. Everyone was very surprised by this choice. After all, this guy was the weakest of them all, but even he was able to guess it. Hanan then began to express his second condition. He reflected on the fact that, while the first condition was like a joke, the war was also needed at least one drummer. So, next, he decided to select the bravest one among them. Han asked which of them knew how to sew, and asked those to step out of the line. One guy scattered them all, looking quite formidable. Han then asked if everyone who remained was all right. She raised her hand and said that she had learned sewing from her mother. No one thought he would be that kind of person. Han told him to come closer and also asked him what his name was. The guy was trembling slightly and said his name was Subang. Han told him that he was a mama's boy, but that he was worth it. He considered the fact that this heavyweight turned out to be a mama's boy left Ray Yuxu bewildered. He couldn't understand his motivations or his plan. He then inquired about the number of rings Enlay had remaining. He told Bian that he would take care of mending the clothes, and then asked the troops if anyone knew how to dance, adding that acrobatic skills would also be appreciated. He inquired whether there were any other blacksmiths or perhaps chess players among them, as their skills would also be valuable. He continued by asking if anyone knew how to slaughter cattle or anything similar. Everyone began to respond and step out of the line. Generally, about 30 people gathered in this manner. Ruxue asked again whether Anne was truly planning to use only 30 people. The girl suddenly became kinder to Janan and even gave him useful advice. After encouraging him to steal the medicinal recipes, she kicked him out as soon as people to fight against the Grandmaster. Anne looked at her and confirmed that, of course, he was. He asked what she was thinking, implying that it would definitely be the case. Then, the guy started to tell him. The strength of those men was great, certainly considerable, but they simply needed to start gathering together. Otherwise, they wouldn't be capable. To break through Grandmaster Ruxue's defenses, he questioned whether they could kill the Grandmaster and emphasized that the soldiers' lives were not mere pawns to be played with, absolute pawns to be trifled with. He fixed the girl's hair, telling her that she was beautiful even when angry. He also told her that she could have confidence in them, and that even though they were currently weak, there were almost 5 hours until nightfall, which was more than enough time to make them much stronger. Stronger. The girl wanted to object, but it seemed she couldn't bring herself to. Jinan instructed all the chosen ones to follow him, muttering, regarding the matter of killing the Grandmaster. By the afternoon, everyone would know everything. The troops who hadn't been chosen were arguing about what their son-in-law had been thinking when he chose the team. Such an important task. They wondered if leading their team would lead to the collapse of their city, Nevada. What they felt most strongly was that their commander, Jan, was going to marry a scumbag like him. Jan Ruxue shouted, "Enough with the gossip." She raised her hand and asked, "How dare you even gossip about your husband like that?" The girl told them to head to training, and that today they would train twice as hard to learn their lesson. No one expected her to defend him. The girl brought those recipes. The poor man immediately died at the hands of his favorite woman. It's better not to go into the details of this trivial love story. Got angry. Someone said that 5 o'clock was too late. Just then, someone came riding on horseback. It was the little prince, along with Inen. The little prince turned to Inen, and he asked if his brother held high expectations for this small, dilapidated town. Yang confirmed that it was true, and also mentioned Yang Rei's beauty. Yue was truly mesmerizing. The prince, while strangling a girl, told her that regardless of her beauty, she was an ungrateful little brat. The little prince exclaimed, who would have thought they would dare attack San before her marriage? It would damage the reputation of their entire estate, and they wouldn't let them get away with it. Yang wholeheartedly agreed. The prince then stated that it was because of that person that his older brother met his death. Without, however, he wouldn't mind having a little fun with her first. The prince turned to his mercenary and instructed him to listen to his errand. The man he bowed respectfully and said he was listening attentively, wanting them to pay for what they had done. Father, along with Ray Yuxu, stood next to the Sam, little prince and his assistant. Father said they felt honored by the little prince's visit to their city. The little prince looked at Yan, while Ray Yuxu licked his lips, and said it was no wonder his brother wanted to marry a girl with such a face and figure. The prince turned to her and said that he had heard that she was married. She thought she had heard, a long time ago, that the little prince was a pervert, but she didn't think he was so frivolous as to. Linu said that since he wasn't dead, she would finish him off herself. Now she looked at him with innocent eyes and said that no one should know about it, or her reputation. Bother her with such words right from the start. Ruxue informed the little prince that she was indeed married. The little prince laughed, clapping his hands as he said that. It was a shame, but since it was such a good day, today would be his. There was already a certain tense atmosphere, and it seemed they would really have to stick to the plan. Jinan, Rajuk's father, laughed and said that the little prince must be joking. He asked them to follow him to the mansion, as they needed to rest, and the Yang family had prepared a banquet to celebrate their arrival. The prince agreed, saying he only had one conversation to have. The prince and his mercenary entered the dining room and sat at a table laden with food. The father asked his wife to calm down. The little prince only looked at the girl's voluptuous breasts. The little prince turned to Master Yang and told him he was very fortunate to have such a beautiful daughter and wife. The charming women added that having such a wonderful daughter must be a blessing bestowed upon them from a past life, and the father thanked them. Thank you. He thought about how this guy wasn't just lusting after his daughter Ruxue, but was also eyeing his wife. Now he agreed with Giannani about how the prince should die. He said he had heard that her son-in-law was a talented genius and asked why he hadn't arrived yet. His father answered him that he must be joking. After all, he had told him not to show up so he wouldn't bother them. The prince replied that he should invite him anyway. His pathetic body contained Onden's soul, and that he was just a despicable, gloomy being. This girl was the first goddess of cultivation. Her name was Jan King. Would be ruined. The girl added that if he really loved her, he should let her kill him, and said that Linu Yu has absolutely no sense of shame. Invite his son-in-law so he wouldn't think he was too arrogant. His father replied that he would immediately order him to be called to the table, becoming more and more. Ryu's father agreed with Han, saying the prince would want to see him in person, which is why he would allow him to sit at the table with them. Jinan then arrived, and he said that the son-in-law had already arrived and that the Red Eyes troops were ready, and entered the room where they were having dinner. Jinan bowed and said that the commoner was happy to receive the prince. The little prince remarked that it was no wonder such a handsome, fair-skinned man could win the heart of a lady, and smiled and thanked him. Ruxue thought his acting skills were excessive. The little prince was very hypocritical, thinking about what a bastard he was. And she didn't understand how Ray Yuxu could fall in love with a bastard like him. The little prince then said that now that everyone was here, it was time for them to getting down to business. He began by saying that he had originally come here to propose marriage to Ray Yuxu instead of her brother, but since she was married, he couldn't do that. The little prince stated that their father has conditions that they are free to reject. His father then inquired about what those conditions were. The little prince responded that they should allow their city to return to the Tifen county prefectures, and that they must also surrender all of their military power to the city guards. Do you have any objections? Ray Yuxu's father turned to the little prince and asked him if he could have some. He said that if she killed him, he wouldn't be able to salvage his reputation. Jan wondered how a girl as beautiful as she was could possess such a cold heart, and how fortunate. Time to think about it. The boy agreed, but said not much. He thanked him for his understanding. The prince added that he wanted something more. While Lord Qi considered, the terms demanded that his daughter and wife serve him. The prince stated he enjoyed drinking wine with beauties like the two of them, which greatly angered Master January. He reflected on how the prince seemed to believe that because his city was in a vulnerable position, he wouldn't dare object. Janan then bowed. She turned to the prince and told him that if he needed a drinking companion, he could keep the other two beauties and wouldn't need to bother his mother-in-law and wife. The little prince was becoming incredibly crude, declaring he would sleep with his mother-in-law and his wife tonight. Ruxue and her mother were furious, and inquired if that meant they wouldn't be allowed to leave his mansion that night. The little prince laughed, saying that it depended on how pleased he was. And although Anne's wife and mother-in-law were beautiful enough for him, the prince wanted both of them to be his. They would kneel before him and start playing drums for him, and then maybe he would forgive their small town. Lord Chan was already quite angry. Jian Hanan. He asked the prince if he feared that he would revolt against them, whoever they were, now that they were in his territory. The prince laughed and asked how dare this idiot threaten him. He added that hundreds of thousands of people from this town would be buried with them, and the great lord would. It was that this guy was going to die without realizing it. One of the men turned to Linu and remarked that he'd already said it would be easier to just kill him immediately. He grabbed her by the plus. Take care of it. Hanan said that since they were saying that, they wouldn't start a mutiny. Anne applauded and said that as a small gift, they should accept it. Anne had. To his troops. Behind him, the prince looked at them in surprise, noticing they all carried some kind of bloody bags in their hands. The prince was no longer so calm. He thought about the fact that all his soldiers were dead. He turned to Yang Tiangang and asked him how he even dared to rebel against him. Janan and Jiang Tianan said in unison that he must die today. The prince told Yang Tianan that he was a walking corpse and told Inan to bring him his Daqianan corpse. He obeyed him immediately. Inu ran towards them. Tiangang had already taken his fighting stance. They faced each other and the fight began. They took turns hitting each other, swinging and clenching their fists. Tiangang was slammed against the wall and coughed violently and asked him if he had reached the first-level master stage. She was surprised because it seemed Tangan had reached the first-level master rank and the prince was now in a somewhat precarious situation, with Anne smiling. He said it was truly unexpected and that the master backing them was now a disadvantage. Jian Han demanded that he kneel and strike his head against the ground 3 times to spare his life. The little prince was furious and asked if Jian Han had a death wish. Jian Han assured the prince that despite Tangan bursting his body, he still didn't have enough life force, and since he was only injured, Anne was certain that he waste and commented that she was being too kind. He added that it would be better to tell him directly that she would be his girlfriend, and then simply kill him, letting that be would kill him in 10 moves. The prince declared that he would cut off this son-in-law's arms and legs and sew his mouth shut. He wanted him to witness with his own eyes what happens to those who dare to insult him. Janan told the noble elder to take his time, as his subordinate had made preparations for him, especially some extra gifts, and since he had already received the first gift, he should look at the palm of his hand if he didn't believe him. His entire hand was covered in cuts from broken glass. Cut. And since H had sat down at the table, he had not eaten or drunk anything, fearing that he would be poisoned. He got angry and asked him when he would have time to do it. Han asked him if he thought the city air was too sweet. After all, he had specially prepared it for him. The guy then said that he would not have been poisoned if he had not used his life force, and that it was the poisonous vapors that entered his body along with his life force. He said he didn't need to worry. The poison wouldn't kill him entirely, just weaken him, leaving him with 50% of his strength. He also commented that Han was clever. The poison trick was very effective. He had always been cautious, but he certainly hadn't expected to be caught by a kid. Aang lamented that, if only, with only 50% of his strength remaining, Han's father-in-law shouldn't have the same amount of strength left either. Han applauded and pointed out that his father-in-law wasn't his next opponent anyway. Next opponent, and hoped he would accept his next gift. Armored troops then entered the scene. Aang remarked that it seemed Han was willing to sacrifice the lives of last thing he knew before dying. Lin responded that she was too soft-hearted and perhaps should listen to him. They smiled simultaneously and declared that these people, in order to confront him. The prince laughed, calling the boy a complete idiot and stating that these turtles couldn't survive a battle. Against a grandmaster, his father wondered why he had chosen so few men when there were 3,000 inches the army, and Ray Yuxu's mother didn't understand it either. Why he had brought so few men. Han said that if they thought they could defeat him, they should try and see. Han said that since he was insisting so much, he would comply with his wishes. For him, they were going to kill him, but the guy decided to flee from them. They turned around and saw that he was gone. Lin told Sang that he couldn't have gotten very far, and that they better run after him now. Someone was approaching. Jinan ran as fast as he could. The guy ran towards a tree, completely out of breath, and leaned against it. He leaned against the tree and said that, luckily, he had escaped. As they talked, he couldn't imagine how the dead man must be feeling right now. Jinan, after hearing all this, at this point, Jinan and Lin had already started running towards him. Hian yelled at him, calling him pathetic trash, and told him he shouldn't even try to escape from him. Hian turned around and was surprised. On the other side, a girl on horseback was charging towards him. She was a lovely girl with blonde hair and a ponytail, riding a horse. She asked the guy who was lying. Cheng was the Empress of Sengon Palace. The guy had been her sex slave for many years. She looked at him and said that if he had originally given her, in the grass, what he was doing and asked him if he wanted to die. He looked at her and thought of Noman. It was just then that those two people came running over. They looked at Yan Ray and Yuxu and were greatly surprised. Yan Ruxue looked at them and asked what they were doing, and if they were aware that fighting was forbidden. In the city, Sang turned to the lady and told her that Hian was a traitor, that he had attacked them first, and that they had just caught him in the act. Sang said that they were going to arrest him for stealing the recipes, and he thought the rumors about Yang being very strict with guarding the city were true. She looked at him and questioned him again about the robbery. Sang confirmed that everything was true and that this person, Hian, had betrayed his family and stolen valuable recipes for his own personal gain. Hian thought about how much of a lie that was. John looked at Hian, asked if it was really him, and informed him that his family had already sent people after him, that they would soon come for him to punish him severely. Hian stood up, sword in hand, and declared that this man was nothing but a liar, small-time, and not even capable of taking responsibility for his own actions. The man began to shout, claiming that they were both incredibly cruel and they knew he was a naive man head over heels in love with Linu Yu, so they tricked him into stealing those valuable recipes from the Hian family. Jinan rose up crying, saying that when he had sacrificed everything to steal all those recipes for her, it was because he had just caught the two of them, his soul. She wouldn't have wasted her time on a delinquent. He groaned loudly, saying that with his help, he would be able to ascend to a new level of cultivation today, in the forest, and he no longer cared about being offended. His heart was literally shattered. The man then asked him why. I was doing this. Yang looked down, and the two of them simultaneously glared at her with anger and guilt. Ken decided to say that they wanted to eliminate the witnesses. Once, which is why they tried to kill him. Sang brandished his sword and shouted that Jinan was a sneaky scoundrel who only wanted to set a trap for them. Hian remained, sobbing stupidly as they continued to harass him. They have no respect for the law. Jinan was about to strike him with the sword, but Jay stopped him and seized the sword, and told him that she would personally escort him to the Jay family's house so that they could resolve their family issues themselves. The sword was right in front of Jen's face. The guy thought Jen was a stupid pig, especially since they had clearly stated that fighting was prohibited here, but still, was trying to kill him in front of Miss Chi, claiming he'd heard His Royal Highness wanted Lady Yang and her older brother to marry, and when that happened, he would become the prince's confidant, allowing him to serve in the Sang Royal Palace. He hoped Lady Yang wouldn't interfere in the matter concerning this Jinan. Hian flipped him off and called his words nonsense, questioning why he thought His Highness would pursue a girl as beautiful as Ji, with someone as humble and unworthy as a member of the Song family. John believed the Song family had no place in the palace. Anu, angered by this, declared, and only after that would she let him go. Anne said that was nonsense and that she would never let him go. She added that he didn't know that today she would only consume his soul. that he was a dead man and ordered Lin to kill him. Miss G then grabbed her sword and flew towards him, sword in hand. Lin questioned what was happening, and if he had reached the 3rd level of cultivation. Lin was annoyed because they were roughly the same age, yet she already possessed such power. The girl realized she never knew I would ever back down. Xian pointed a finger at Lin, taunting her to come at him and kill him. Inu pulled Lin away from him, questioning how he had managed to reach the 3rd level at such a young age. He also inquired if he was protecting Xian's family, adding that his family worked for the county government. The lady yelled at them to leave immediately. Inu began to leave, but ultimately told Xian that he could chase after Miss John as much as he wanted, adding that he was just a pathetic mongrel. The boy began to speak about how his father wouldn't let this go so easily, and while he was reveling in his freedom, he and his father would catch him, and he would pay for everything. He began to apologize to Miss Yangi, saying that they would soon be related, and that he would take care of Jinan. Inu told Lin that they should leave. Xian loudly told them, "See you never." Xian touched the sword. Lady Yang pointed the sword at the boy, and she told him that he must now follow her to the Xian family's house, and that if they had truly done him an injustice, then she would help him to obtain justice. Xian thought about the fact that even if the Xian family discovered that he had been framed, he would still face some. It would be better if she just killed him. She smiled and asked him if he liked it. She got off of him and lay down next to him, telling him that it was to make him submit. Cruel punishment, and slightly removed the sword from his shoulder and said that he had an idea and knew what to do to prevent Jank from marrying that guy, even before she could tell him. At the city government residence, someone slammed a hand on the table and asked if he intended to marry someone from there. A man was sitting in meditation, with 2 girls standing in front of him. He said he didn't agree with the marriage because not only does the man not know how to behave, but he also has a bad reputation. That guy isn't worthy of being her husband. The girl next to Yang was her mother, and she said that marriage is a very important event in a girl's life, and it's best not to create problems. Jan stayed behind the wall, listening to the conversation. She didn't expect him to go see her parents immediately. She went to her parents, and they told her that the county government had sent an army to prepare. The matchmaking is set in advance, and in 3 days, they will be in the city. Right now, only they can influence this situation, and if they reject it, their engagement will be immediately cancelled. But if they do it right now, the king will have time to send troops. So, it has to be done before the afternoon, otherwise, it won't be too late. His father got angry, pointed at him, and asked why him, that worthless piece of trash, was chosen. The guy stood still, and just smiled. And yet, what was all of that about? Jay stood up with his sword and asked which of the 2 would marry him. Hyun looked at her and, to her, but apparently it wasn't enough, and she needed to try again. Anne asked again and again. She thought about the fact that if she did it again, she wouldn't. Asked why she rejected him, and she replied, saying that he was trash and that he had committed a bad deed. Hyun told her that the idea of marriage is very good, but this town is full of other people, so why would she choose him? He responded that it was because he had to. He sat down on the grass and said that he was a stupid, insignificant piece of trash with a terrible reputation. Besides, someone as worthless as him couldn't possibly marry the daughter of the head of the city government. Nobody would even think of something like that happening. Anne added that it would also be incredibly embarrassing if he had already arrived with the army, only to find that his wife had been stolen by a scumbag right in front of the entire city. She smiled and said that this approach was perfect for the aristocrat to distance himself from her, as he would become a laughingstock in front of everyone. Even the children would laugh. Miss J said that, in that case, the prince might hate their city and, furthermore, would never forgive them. Because of such, Anne crossed her arms and stated that the best way to overcome fear was to start confronting it head-on. Anne added that she was certain that, as long as he didn't arrive with his army, he would find a way to deal with him. The boy thought about how brave that sounded. Miss J reflected on the fact that now that she had finally decided to end this marriage, she only had one option left, even though the engagement rumors had already spread, and the girl considered the fact that she still wanted to try out the idea. He looked at her with determination, which was why he had told his parents that he wouldn't